Amen. Hopefully you will have 6 words that appear on the screen, and it says, don't be afraid, just have faith. What is your reaction to reading or hearing those words, particularly if you're someone from the last year who's experienced redundancy? If I was to say to you, don't be afraid, just have faith, do you find that as an encouragement or a slight insult? Or if you've had poor health and not a good doctor's report, or if you work within the NHS service during the pandemic, if I was just to say to you, don't be afraid, just have faith, would you receive these blessed thoughts with confidence and with the intention that they are intended, which is to be for your good? Probably not. You'll naturally be like, how can you say that? I'm going through hardship. Things are difficult. Life is pressured. And yet Jesus says these 6 words to Jairus, which we're going to read later on, as a sign of encouragement, and particularly to us as Christians, that fear in any form shouldn't be something that dictates or is prevalent in our lives, that we should be a people that live free from fear. Fear often withholds us from receiving and accessing both his good works, his gifts, his salvation, his mercy, maybe extending ministry or calling or gifting. Fear works in our lives where we make decisions where we withdraw or we avoid or we ignore or we doubt. And I want to talk tonight quite openly about how fear shouldn't be prevalent in your life, that it should be something for which you should be seeking out, that you should be praying, that you should be asking the Lord to minister to and to bring healing. In 2 Timothy 1, verse 7, the scriptures are clear that fear does not come from God. It says, for God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and a sound mind. So if it's not from God, the word also tells us that those who are children of light, those who are believers in Jesus, we're going to experience opposition. We're going to experience spiritual battles. And it's something of a work of the enemy to deter us from our walk, our journey, our intimacy with the Lord. And I was very grateful to Karen to be sharing so honestly about responding to a word last week that was shared from the front. An experience so many years ago for which God is wanting to speak to her now and say, that moment of the Ouija board or the tarot card reading in your life, I don't want any of that spirituality, that spirit of fear to linger over your life anymore. I don't want it to cause any doubt or any questioning. And in my own life, words of knowledge from the front has also been a point of encouragement. A few weeks back, Rue shared about a fear of death. And as Christians, we know that we have died to ourselves, that we have received the gift of salvation, and eternity with him is promised. But for me, and particularly during this pandemic, death has been one of those recurring fears that keeps coming back. I lost a friend last year for which that prominence and that focal point of death, where questioning my eternity, where am I going? What does that experience of death feel like? And it was very much a fear. That word was shared from the platform. I felt to go back and get prayer ministry. James shared a word or encouragement. Is there anything in your house for which has an attachment to kind of the demonic or spirituality? I searched those things out and got rid of those that were most obvious. And that prayer was instantly tested 2 days later, whereby I had a conversation not expected, not planned, where someone was telling me about the nature of their job, and their job was involved in death, the burying, the making, and listening, giving in detail. And before, that would leave nightmares. There would be a reservation. I'd get up, I'd leave. And it just showed me that God had answered prayer in that moment instantly. So a spirit of fear is something for which we should not endure, tolerate, or accept, because it undermines the sovereignty of God. It pulls into question his nature, his goodness. Psalm 18, verse 2 is just one example where it says that Lord is my rock and my fortress, my deliverer, my God, my strength in whom I will trust, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold. We worship a God who is a defender. He's a protector. He's the guarantor of our salvation, that in him all things lie goodness. And wherever fear is evident in our lives, it's trying to come against that truth. It's trying to pull us away from walking and abiding so closely with Jesus. This series of Encounter, the heart of it is that as a church, as individuals, that we would continue to pursue the presence of Jesus in both tangible ways, but in the decision making, in our families, in every area of our lives. And this message about living free from fear is just a greater opportunity to encounter Jesus' freedom and truth. So if the spirit of fear isn't something that is associated with the character and nature of God, then it is faith that we are called to activate, to apply, to put into practice. And in Hebrews 11, it goes through the list of heroes of faith, where it speaks about how much they accomplished with God on their side. They faced opposition, they faced doubted, grumbling from the people of Israel, but by faith, they overcome and they achieve great things with God. And in verse 33, it says these incredible words that people of faith, that you and I as Christians are able to attain and achieve. It says, by faith, these people overthrew kingdoms, ruled with justice, and received what God had promised them. They shut the mouths of lions, quenched the flames of fire, and escaped death by the edge of the sword. Their weakness was turned to strength. They became strong in battle and put whole armies to flight. That's what faith in Jesus gives us every day. We apply, we press in. Yes, we will face opposition. Yes, there will be questions. But we're able to look and go to him with a confidence that he will be our defender. And in my own life, I've seen how fear and anxiety around particular decisions or moments has almost stopped me pressing into what God either had for me personally or had in terms of my purpose, the calling to the greater church. And I just want to name a few because I want to make the point that fear is so insidious that we tolerate it in our lives in a way as Christians that we shouldn't. It should be identifiable to us. It can be disguised as anxiety. Karen raised about physical illness or sickness. It could be raised by a sense of control. You feel that you are in control of a situation, but actually it's fear that is the reason that you're not pressing through with what the Lord had for you. So back in 2004, when the church was planted, I had an invitation to come to Regeneration Church. And I knew who I was back then, and I knew what a church was. It was meant to be a space of talking about the holiness, the love of God. I was so far from all of those things, and I nearly declined that invitation. In fact, I did multiple times, but because of the persistence of the individual, I just thought I'd just give it a go, and then I'll go once and I'll never come again. If I succumbed to my fear, I wouldn't be here today. I probably wouldn't be a Christian. I wouldn't know the gift of salvation, but there's an opportunity to push through. 2010, a leadership team, Ruth, came and spoke and said, we've been praying as a leadership team and we want to invite you onto the leadership team. Now, as I said, 2004 was a bit of a mess. 2010, even worse so. So I knew that I wasn't in a good place relationally. My discipleship wasn't taking it all too seriously. I wanted things to be somewhat more perfect, more right. If I succumbed to, I'm not ready, I'm not quite sure, then I wouldn't be in a capacity of leadership that God has called me to do, to be a part of how I serve the kingdom. And in 3 instances, 2014, 2017, and 2021, individuals have presented jobs to me that seemed a right fit. They were a right fit. But I looked at the job spec and I was like, that calls for a skill in writing that writing is not my forte. I prefer to speak, conversation, to communicate. And that key skill, I'm afraid of my written skill. I don't want a job with my written skill. And I nearly turned down 3 jobs for which God in each of them was leading me to the point that I was in. If I said, no, I'm not good enough, God hasn't called me, I'm going to turn away from that, then I wouldn't be, again, where I am in this point of a career that it's heavy writing, where I'm like, God, I need to rely on your skill, your gifting, your wording, that you're going to sharpen this gift because you've placed me here. And just some practical pointers that encourage me to push through that resistance, to push through that sense of I'm not good enough, I'm not able, am I worthy, and am I in the right place, is to push forward for prayer. There'd been many times where I denied the opportunity to go up and pray because I was afraid. I don't want to share my vulnerability or my weakness with another person in the church, or I don't want to talk about that in a constructive way. I'd rather be isolated and in my own thinking and in my own doubt. Do take up prayer. And if there's any hesitancy after the second set of worship where you're someone that's like, there's a resistance, there's a kind of an irritation, not stillness, your heart is beating. That's a work of the enemy trying to stop you from encountering breakthrough or an answer to prayer or clarity and guidance from the Lord. The other thing that was important to me was about being surrounded by good counsel. And the same as what's been shared up here in testimony about the word of knowledge that is given from the front. There were many times when people didn't know my situation for which I could go and be like, God is speaking with clarity, press through, go and get prayer, apply, remove this area from your life or do something about it. Do not dismiss the word of knowledge that is given from the front. And as I said, fear is something that is so insidious. It's something that it can be so disguised in our lives, for which we tolerate. And like mold within bread, if it's not cut out and if it's not removed, it will make the whole bread stale. So we're going to read that passage in Mark 5. I'm going to invite Emily to come up and to read that, where we read the context. We learn, why did Jesus say these words to Jairus and what is going on in this moment?
Jesus got into the boat again and went back to the other side of the lake, where a large crowd gathered around him on the shore. Then a leader of the local synagogue, whose name was Jairus, arrived. When he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet, pleading fervently with him. "My little daughter is dying," he said. "Please come and lay your hands on her, heal her so she can live." Jesus went with him, and all the people followed, crowding around him. A woman in the crowd had suffered for 12 years with constant bleeding. She had suffered a great deal from many doctors, and over the years she had spent everything she had to pay them, but she had gotten no better. In fact, she had gotten worse. She had heard about Jesus, so she came up behind him through the crowd and touched his robe. For she thought to herself, "If I can just touch his robe, I will be healed." Immediately the bleeding stopped, and she could feel in her body that she had been healed of her terrible condition. Jesus realized at once that healing power had gone out from him, so he turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my robe?" His disciples said to him, "Look at this crowd pressing around you. How can you ask, 'Who touched me?'" But he kept on looking around to see who had done it. Then the frightened woman, trembling at the realization of what had happened to her, came and fell to her knees in front of him and told him what she had done. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. Your suffering is over." While he was still speaking to her, messengers arrived from the home of Jairus, the leader of the synagogue. They told him, "Your daughter is dead. There's no use troubling the teacher now." But Jesus overheard them and said to Jairus, "Don't be afraid, just have faith."
Thank you very much, Emily. Two individuals wanting to encounter Jesus in a very personal and specific way. And I want to start with the woman. The woman's opposition to encountering or meeting with Jesus is both physical, psychological, and personal. Physical in the sense that she has to go through a crowd, and that we see through her infirmity, her bleeding, her disease, that she has been laden with this for over 12 years, that she's not upright, she's having to crawl, but yet she's pushing through. And the part that is psychological and personal is that her sickness has been a stain for so long, 12 years, that she has carried the shame of that, and most likely in isolation. And the context of that is that in Leviticus 15:19, it speaks of this: when a woman has discharge, and the discharge is her body is blood, she shall be in her menstrual impurity for 7 days, and whoever touches her shall be unclean until the evening. A Levitical law that God put in place, that as the people of Israel have been led out of Egypt, it was a custom to separate and give laws and customs about how to do health, how to do civil and criminal, and to set up establishments and rules that they would be a community of cohesion. And something as simple as a woman who is on her cycle, who's on her period for 7 days, would be separated for a moment of time away from the community. And then once it's finished, she'd be back in the community, being able to interact. That was the rule for 7 days. But this is a woman that has been bleeding for 12 years. It's more likely that a custom, that she has been ostracized from community, that she's probably not a part of a family, that everyone looks upon her with questioning and doubt. Why has this woman got this disease? She has sought out the best physician. She's paid money. She has sought help and counsel, and yet her infirmity is still upon her. And she hears Jesus is in town, and out of her desperation, she goes to Jesus. What is the fear that could be prominent in this? What could hold her back? Her shame, 12 years of isolation, 12 years of being secluded. But this moment, she's looking and she sees and hears of Jesus, just one touch, and she's convinced that she would be healed. This desire to encounter just the physical healing of Jesus is what encourages her to push through, to not to succumb to her fears, to her doubts, to her shame, but to push through on that. And we read the same story in Luke 8 where Jesus directs, he asks, this power has left me. Power of healing has gone upon her. Who has done this? The disciples are somewhat confused. You're in a crowd, you're being touched by all people. And he says, no, there's been a distinctive touch because it's been ministered to this woman. And he says, daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace. This woman went with an intention of being healed, and she got that. And Jesus speaks to her, daughter, i.e. you're affirmed, you're back in the community, your identity is no longer in your sickness, but is now invited to be a part of my kingdom and to go in peace, this offer and gift of salvation. And it's such a picture of the gospel that this woman, who is the least of these, who is in the most of needs, so dirty, so caught in her shame, encounters the presence of Jesus and her life is transformed. We too, as Christians who believe in Jesus, the strips, the whips, the beatings that he endured for us, that we would be saved, not just for eternity's sake, but that we could live a life free from shame, free from the power of fear in our lives, that we would know him as our rock and our salvation. That is what God gifts all of us, not just in a one-time moment, yes, I'm a believer of Jesus, but in every day of our lives, that we would know the power of Jesus in our families, in our marriage, in our workplace, in our health, that we continue to push through on that nothing would be isolated from him, nothing that is 12 minutes old or 12 years old, that all of it, God is about the restoration and the bringness, wholeness of all. We worship a God of the immeasurably more, to do immeasurably more than all we can ask or imagine, according to his power that is in working us. What a promise. What a promise that God's Spirit would dwell in us, that incredible exchange that we could know life. And so, what are your needs tonight? What is it that you're wanting God to bring? What comfort? What breakthrough? Do not grow weary in asking the Lord for a miracle in your life. Do not allow doubt or fear to hold you back from pressing forward. But as Emily read, this story is actually about Jairus. It's Jairus that goes to Jesus. It's him that has the need, a local synagogue leader where he knows his daughter is sick and unwell. And this story kind of moves from the woman of the bleeding issue to him. And he has reports that come back, and it says, while Jesus was speaking, so whilst he's speaking and affirming to this woman, both her healing and her position in the kingdom, they say, someone came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. Your daughter is dead. He said, don't bother the teacher anymore. Hearing this, Jesus said to Jairus, don't be afraid, just believe, and she will be healed. Confronted with the reality that his daughter is dead, confronted with the reality that all is over, the very need that I needed Jesus to speak into, his healing, his resurrection power, it seemed ajar, it seemed off. And yet what I love about this is that Jairus doesn't listen to the words of his friends that are bringing bad news. He in that moment makes a decision to trust that what Jesus has spoken is possible. He doesn't flee, he doesn't leave, he follows Jesus' leading. What do you do in moments of disappointment, where God hasn't answered the way that you expected, or he didn't answer it in your timing? Are you prepared to press in further? Lord, I'm going to pursue you further in prayer, in devotional reading, in community, in being prayed for, in talking through my faith and my questioning. Are you prepared to push in, or is that your get out? Okay, I came, but it's not answered, so I'm going to withdraw. I'm going to remove myself. Last week, Ruth spoke about Naaman and how important it is for us as Christians and as individuals to surrender our lives to God and our timing. And I think it's so important in this example, not just in Jairus, but in our own lives, that sometimes surrender is how we push through fear. It's how we lay afresh. God, I came with this agenda. I came with this need. I came for you to answer in this way. It hasn't happened as I expected, but I am prepared to wait. I'm prepared to seek you out. I'm prepared to look and chase after you. And it's hard. It's hard to surrender in a moment of uncertainty. This story, we know how it ends, how it concludes. Jairus' daughter is made well. In fact, Jesus makes a point of all those who are unbelieving, those who are laughing, to say, when Jesus said she's only sleeping, actually they need to leave the room, and that the disciples go in and Jairus and his wife go nearby, go near to the room, and Jesus prays. And his daughter is made whole and comes back to life. We know the end of the story, but there are moments and tensions in our lives for which there is a waiting period. And when we have to wait with uncertainty, fear is natural that it will creep in. And it's actually an opportunity, if we allow it, for the enemy to take root of that. God doesn't love you. God isn't able. He doesn't see. He doesn't care. And thinking in my own life, I mentioned about one of those prayer points about my job. In 2014, was an answer to prayer. I got the job that God had for me, but I had to wait 18 months. I came out of a previous job for which I thought it was the springboard to the next thing. It was the career was hitting off, and God had other plans. He used those 18 months to kind of speak specifically into an area of my life that needed healing and ministering to. But I was like, Lord, I need a job now. I want to move out, I want to buy a house, I want to do this. And God was like, 18 months, just time and time and time again. And it was when we was in the old church, but when Ruth and James were in the old manse, I went round their house, and James, as his chirpy American self, could see that I wasn't in a good mood. I was upset. I was was just completely flustered. Like, God, what are you doing? 18 months. I'm in my mid-20s. I'm at the prime of my career. I've applied for things that are above my pay grade and below, and yet you're slamming the door and everything. And James shared this song, and I can't remember who it was, but it is, "Don't give up, you're on the brink of a miracle." And he kept singing it, chirping in the kitchen, dancing, and just going at it. And I'm just sitting, and I'm like, this is not what I need. I want you to console my misery. I want you to kind of like, come to my level, see where it's at. And he just kept going. It's going to come. It's going to come. I said at the beginning, which is true, that there was physical violence that I wanted to go towards James, because it's like, this is not what I want to hear. I don't want to hear that I'm on the brink of a miracle. It's been 18 months. I've been praying, I've been coming, I've been seeking the Lord out. Things haven't happened. I'm genuinely uncertain about what next is going to happen. And after he gave me that song, within a couple of weeks, the prayer was answered. I did get the job. I did get what was needed. But there's something in that tension where we have to push in. Rather than what could have happened, God isn't answering my prayer, I'm not going to pray anymore. I'm not going to read my Bible anymore. This is all a joke. I'm not going to attend church because I've got things that I need to do. I'm not going to apply the word that God had for me in that season, which was continue to press into me, continue to seek me in this area of your life. Keep praying about that. When I'm like, I need a job and you're asking me to pray about this area, keep pushing into what God shows in front of you, and he will meet all your other needs. We pursue the presence of Jesus for one sole purpose, that we would be transformed into the image of him, into his character, into his nature, love, joy, peace. As I said, fear is not something that is attributed to who God is. And so if it's prevalent in our lives, it's an opportunity for the Holy Spirit to minister, to uproot, to increase our faith, but it requires a boldness and a diligence from us. I've recently just finishing reading the book of Exodus, an incredible book. And the moment I keep coming back to is that every time Moses went out to Mount Sinai and is praying or seeking instructions from the Lord about how to organize the people of Israel, where they're to go, there's this moment where he goes up and the presence of the Lord comes upon that mountain in a physical and tangible way. But the people of Israel can't see it. They're not in that space. But when he comes back down, his face is glowing. His face is evident that he's been with the presence of Jesus. And as I was reading this book of Exodus, I'm also reading Oswald Chambers, like a daily devotion. And there was this quote which says this: "When the Spirit fills us, we are transformed. And by beholding God, we become mirrors. You can always tell when someone has beholden the glory of the Lord because your inner spirit senses that the mirror the Lord's own character." We become like mirrors the more that we seek after Jesus. And what a gift that is to the world that don't know him. What a gift that is that people could encounter him. But that's a challenge on us. And it's an invitation that I want to lead as we move into a moment of prayer. A mirror shows you who you are. It reflects back what you see. And in this moment of quiet, I want to invite us to have a moment of reflection and to ask ourselves, Lord, where in my life has fear taken a hold? Where is it distorting your character, the person that you're calling me to be? Where is it hindered? Where has it caused me to be angry and restless and short with people? Where has fear taken a hold? And where by your Spirit are you leading me to? So if we could put up the last passage as our moment of reflection, 2 Corinthians 3, verses 16 to 18, it says this: "But whenever anyone turns to the Lord, the veil is taken away. Their old self is taken away. Now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. And we all, who with unveiled faces contemplate the Lord's glory, are being transformed into his image, an ever-increasing glory, which comes from the Lord, who's the Spirit." What a promise, that the Spirit brings freedom and that it transforms us into the image of his Son. So I just want to pray. I want to pray a moment that we would be vulnerable, that we would hear the Holy Spirit speaking to each of us specifically how fear has taken a hold of our walk and journey, how it occupies our mind or our behavior or our decision making. Holy Spirit, I thank you that when you illuminate an area of our life, it's because you desire to bring freedom, restoration, and healing, Lord. So I just really pray that we would all be attentive to what you're speaking to us tonight. I'm going to invite the band to come up. I just saw the scene of Beauty and the Beast, where the beast looks into the water and is taken aback by their reflection, and he doesn't like it. And I just felt that that was a word for someone here tonight that doesn't like what they see, and that it's that message is a distorted one, because God has spoken over you or has seen you as worthy, as valuable, as dying for you, as giving you new life. So for any of that resonates, for which you're like, the idea of looking in a mirror and seeing back at myself, I don't like that idea. I just want to give an opportunity for you to stand, to pray for you, and also to pray for anyone here tonight that hasn't received Jesus as their Lord and Savior, who hasn't made that commitment to walk in communion and fellowship with him, to give you also that opportunity. So as Aman leads us and the team leads us in worship, there will be a team at the back that will be willing and able and love to pray with you. If anything for which I've shared, or a testimony for which you're wanting to receive prayer ministry for, we would love to pray for you.